few things I'd like to share. Maybe they can be made a package. We like packages, you know, but of course, in our practice and our experience as practitioners, packages don't work. So I'd like to talk a little bit about trust, and the trust that it's not trust in something, it's trust in, well, it's trust in life, and trust in, I guess we could call it in ourselves, but it's really more than that. It's just in life. And I was thinking about it, that it is not that I have to get something, so then I can, because we often think like that. I used to think like that. If I get clarity, if I get awakening experiences, if I get whatever, you know, then I can start trusting more my practice. And maybe something like that does happen, you know. But I think it's so much this trust that I think that we can develop and see and express in our way, in our life. It has to do with practice, but not necessarily with arriving at a certain point or getting something out of practice. So that's one thing I'd like to say, and maybe develop it. Another thing I'd like to mention is one of our koans. Maybe Gregory will help me here. It's Yun Men, and the question, I don't remember the exact question, but it's like, what is the profound meaning of the Dharma, or something like that. And it's not what's Bodhidharma coming from the West, what's the meaning, but it's something about the Dharma. You know, the person wanted to know something, give me something about what this is all about. And Yun Men says, an appropriate response. And I ended up watching the other day, a couple of days ago, a little video in YouTube of Stephen Batchelor with a man named John Peacock, maybe, something sponsored by The Guardian and in London, and done at St. Paul's Cathedral about religion and spirituality or something or other. And he mentions this. He mentions this koan. You know, and I hang out with it. And, you know, it's just, it became so alive in the next couple of days, you know. You see, it becomes alive because it is alive, because we're alive. There's life, and it's moving, and it's now, and it's completely our life, with all its craziness, with all its beauty, with all its political chaos, with all its, you know, sadness. but it's moving and it is alive. And now I'm part of our job. I heard Phil say something when I joined before the meeting started, that he tells people something, but people don't listen. I have no idea what they were talking about. But so this appropriate response is really very much connected with our practice and with our trust. You know, our practice gives us the opportunity to embody our practice and then step into the world which we are anyway, but with a different, maybe, the different sense, not so much outer preoccupied, outer defense, defending myself, or outer, you know, all of that thing that we do, me, mine, my stuff, that we can really step out. Or what I mean by out, it's not really out, you know, but since I'm talking about practice, and I'm talking about so much of our practice is within a certain container. So much of our practice is within a certain container. And of course, our practice shouldn't end in the container. Or the container is much bigger than the dojo, the dokusan room, my Zen friends. As you've heard me said about Peter Hershock's book, it's not enough to know what Buddha nature is, but what Buddha nature does. And it's that moving, contingent, which is a word that Stephen Batchelor's uses a lot. This thing that it's not fixed, that we step out, step into our life. Because we are alive, we happen to have a practice, and more than happen to have a practice, we have our practice because for whatever reason, we have chosen this path and we love it. And it transforms us little by little, little by lot by lot, whatever. So I think that all of that allows us or encourages us, if we see that, and I don't mean an esoteric seeing, I just mean seeing our practice, you know. I'm not necessarily saying of waking up, although that always helps. But the engagement with the practice, I think by its very nature creates that kind of trust that we are in the right place. We are in our place. It's not right or wrong. We are in our place. Yeah. Okay, so that's the second theme. And Now I'd like to read something from Yan Wu again. He's pretty cool. I enjoy him. I don't think I've read some of these parts, but this particular letter, you know, as Nelson Foster was telling me, the problem with the Cleary brothers, it's like they don't help too much in their translation, and they don't give any context of where it comes from. They don't have any footnotes. So this is called Inexhaustible Treasury. We don't know if that's the name of the letter or the theme that the Cleary brothers chose to name this part of a letter, because in no way it appears that he's speaking to somebody in a letter. But anyway, so the Inexhaustible Treasury. Devas and humans and all sentient beings, including the enlightened ones, all depend on the awesome power of this thing. This thing is the inexhaustible treasury. But although ordinary sentient beings have this within them, they are in the dark about it. And so they become wrongly subject to sinking down into the cycle of birth and death and affliction. The enlightened ones, on the other hand, arrive at the awesome power of this thing, and thus experience transcendent realization. Though delusion and enlightenment differ, their underlying inconceivable reality is one and the same. Though delusion and enlightenment differ, their underlying and conceivable reality is one and the same. That is why the Buddhas and ancestral teachers gave instructions and pointed directly to this reality. They always directed sentient beings to comprehend for themselves their own inherent, fundamental, perfect, wondrously illuminated true mind, and to dispense with all the false thoughts and schemes and knowledge and views associated with sensory afflictions and troubles. Go directly to your personal existence in the field of the 5 clusters, 5 skandhas of form, sensation, conception, motivational syntheses, and consciousness. Motivational synthesis, that's what we call in our mental reaction. And consciousness. Turn the light around. Here we go. Turn the light around and reflect back. Your true nature is clear and still, and as is, empty, through. It's empty, through, and accepted. When you clearly see this true nature is mind, and this mind is true nature. All activities and myriad changes and transformations in the sensitive realm have never shaken it. That is why it's called the ever-abiding fundamental source. If you reach this basic root, whatever you do in your empowered functioning, will penetrate through. What is necessary is to cut off the flow of your conditioned mind and witness it. If you hesitate in thought, then you're out of touch. If a person's root nature has been pure and still and settled for a long time, it is very easy to be empowered. You just reflect back a bit and penetrate through, and then you can witness it and experience entry. know, I mean, it's nothing, it's not saying, just the way that he's saying it, or that the way that it's translated might be a little new. But it's this thing that, you know, that we talk about often. Whether you're walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, concentrate your spirit and silently reflect. Be pure and naked, without interruption and without breaks, so that naturally no subjective views arise and you will merge with this true essence. It is neither born nor destroyed, neither existent nor non-existent. It is neither solid nor empty. It is apart from names and forms. This is the scenery of your own fundamental ground, your own original face. When the ancients employed all their hundreds and thousands and millions of expedient teachings devices, it was always to enable people to go toward this and penetrate through to freedom. And the appropriate response. As soon as you penetrate through, then you penetrate through deeply to the source. You can cast aside the tile that was used to knock at the gate. The provisional means that were used to get you there. And there is absolutely nothing occupying your feelings. Actually, practice at this level for 20 or 30 years and cut off all the verbal demonstrations and creeping vines and useless devices and states until you're set free from conditioned mind. And this will be the place of peace and bliss when you stop and rest. Thus it is said, if you're stopping now, then stop. If you seek a time when you finish, there will never be a time when you finish. He goes beyond what, you know, the trust that I was talking about, you know, but of course it's included. Because, you know, I picked up three Pillars of Zen, which I haven't picked up in so long, man. Man, that's intense. That's really, I'm glad I'm reading some of it, because it's really great. But I can see how it sometimes it freaks out people, and new people to read it too early. Sometimes it's too weird. But also it's fascinating to see what, you know, Soen Roshi, and then Son Roshi, you know, and Daiun Sogaku and Yasutani, you know, they're all part of this beginning. See how for him, how it did all started. I mean, he didn't Japan. He didn't know Chinese. He had been in Japan because he was a recorder in the Japanese War Tribunal court, you know, when they prosecuted for the crimes of the war. Yeah, as if the Japanese had only done that, you know. Nobody prosecuted the Americans for bombing the atomic bomb. But anyway, so he was a court reporter, and that was his experience with Japan. And he was very impressed. He was very impressed about a certain directness of the people that were being charged with crimes against humanity, or whatever they called it then. So then when he came back, he was a businessman. He left the business, he left everything. and just sold his apartment, his car, and moved to Japan, and started looking for places to sit. He went to Soen Nagakawa and Ryutakuji. Eventually, Soen Nagakawa tells Daiun Sugaku Harada, and trained there. And that was an insane place as far as the strictness. And that's what sometimes monastery seems like it had in its entry. The purpose of Zen is Kensho. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that you were in there and you come to Sesshin, and the emphasis was like constantly being repeated over and over again. Mm-hmm. You have to go deeper, deeper. You still don't have it. And whack, whack, whack. He says he got hit so much, He didn't have a clue what was he doing. What was he doing? He was against any kind of religiosity and ritual and stuff. And little by little, things changed for him. Anyway, of course, that things have changed a lot. Even Rochester Zen Center is not the way it is. It's not the way it was when he was teaching there. And rightly so, I think that we do not. Although as Sesshin, I think, a lot of people think, coming from other places, that our Sesshin are pretty intense and strict and hard. So we do wake up. We do get a little bit of insight here and there, and a little bit more insight here and there. And we continue working, practicing. Hakuin always considered the post-opening, the post-waking up, post-satori, call it, Kensho. Practice, terribly important, terribly important. Really, as Aiken used to say, that's when your practice begins. But then he was telling us always, your practice just begins. It's just beginning, just beginning. So I wanted to share those thoughts, that saying of Yin Men, Yuan Wu's words, and this trust thing that I don't know too much how to really talk about that, but I wanted to say that we don't have to wait, that we can start really trusting because we're alive. And intuitively, we know something that it's really important about being alive, that there's some kind of grace in being here. You don't have to be clear about anything, but just willing to do a practice and, move on, move forward, step out and do what's needed. Mess up, of course. Clean up, of course. Wake up, of course. So thank you for listening. Anybody has something to say, ask, comment? Please feel free. I'd like to hear you talk about maybe this trust. We all have some of that. How is it for you?
It's an interesting question, this trust or faith or confidence.
Right.
I sometimes think I'm kind of Pollyannish about the whole thing. When I was much younger, I thought I could get away. You know, I would go innocently into really dangerous situations and walk out of them, you know, kind of not understanding what I had just participated, the danger of what I had just participated in. Then at some point it was like, oh man, it started, you know, the perspective I started seeing, hey, these things could be dangerous. And so that like hems in, you know, the options that one has, and that I would say, oh, I don't want to go there, it's too scary or it's too dangerous. But it's interesting to look back and to see how the different feeling of trust in myself and trust that the world is right. Some people call that naive, others just call it being in the present. But I like it when I feel that. You know, I don't always, it doesn't always come back real strong, but a lot of times it does strong enough, and really lets me go places and meet people and say things that probably I wouldn't say if I didn't have that sense of trust that, you know, the ground is going to be there under my foot the next step I take.
Right. Yeah, I think I once mentioned in the last few months that Ken MacLeod, his definition of faith is it's like the willingness to do something that we have no idea how it will go, but we're really willing to go for it. Yeah. And you know, this I think that intuitively there's something in us. Maybe.
I had to take my car into.
His experience that's in. I didn't read it this time, but it's a Japanese businessman, I think. He was in a business. It's more like an administrator of a hospital where his wife was the director of the hospital. But he was coming back from Tokyo to Kamakura in the train, and he had started having some intimations of awakening. And then he went to bed, and he woke up in the middle of the night screaming and laughing and crying and saying, "The ancestors didn't lie to me. The ancestors didn't lie to me." And which is it's kind of a beautiful way of putting it, you know. Uh, yeah. So there's something in us, I think, that we intuitively, well, we're drawn to it because there's something in us that is moved, and it's because we have it.
Yeah.
I mean, has become, I remember hearing about that many years ago, and it was like, God, it seems like so convoluted and wishful thinking and kind of, and it makes absolutely so much sense to me now that's it, really.
Yeah.
We're not looking for Trupululu.
I have a superpower. I'm going to share that. It's finding some things finding lost things. And Carol will vouch for that. But a couple months ago, about 6-8 weeks ago, I lost the keys to my car after this whole business of I couldn't get the hood open, the battery was dead, I couldn't recharge the battery. So I had to take I had a tow truck today, take the car into the shop. And they got it open, and I gave him my spare key, but the spare key doesn't have that little radio frequency chip, so he couldn't get the car started. And he said, well, where's the regular key? And I had lost it like 8 weeks ago. But I had, today, I had faith I could find it. When I just kind of like was putzing around looking for it, I couldn't find it. And something drew me to our other car, and I pushed the seat forward, more forward than I'd ever pushed it before, and found the key under the seat. And I was like, there you go. That was the faith in my superpower under extreme need.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, it happens. What do you say about it? It just happens, and then you make up a story about it.
I have a story that is kind of fun like that. I was fairly new. This has happened over 30 years ago. I was living in Occidental, and I had just sobered up maybe less than a year. And I was working at the Daily Planet a couple of nights a week. And at that time, the club would stay open till 4 in the morning, or sometimes at 2. But anyway, I don't remember what day of the week it was. I worked one day a week and one day in the weekend. And I arrived home in Occidental up at Fitzpatrick Lane. And I get into my bedroom and I hear water running. And I live in this house that is not mine, I'm renting. The owner was a friend of mine, his family, his parents and this and that, and he was sleeping. And so I said, well, Don is gonna take care of it. It's his house, it's his responsibility and stuff. And then it didn't quite settle right with me. And I thought of my recovery and I thought of AA and how sometimes they talk about prayer. And I've never been very interested in prayer in a way, in the normal way, petitionary stuff. But I did something like, okay, I think this is not right for me to ignore what's going on. So if there's anything I can do, I'm not a plumber. It's down in the basement. It's a basement. The house was on stilts. It was on a hill. So you could go under the house, maybe just bowing a little bit your head. But I had never really been in there. So I went down and I thought, I'm sure there's a light here. So, but before I went down, I said, okay, I'm going to see if I can do something. But if there's anything that I can be helped by, is just show me the way, what to do, So I went down there and I started touching stuff, and I find the light, which obviously was at the entrance, and right or left at the appropriate height. And I turned the light on, and there's this splash of, just this leak of water, pretty blatantly coming from a pipe, about a few, 5 yards in front of me. And there's all these pipes and cables and stuff, and it's like, I said, Daniel, just go and see. I just go and I see the pipe. And it's sort of silly because all I had to do is follow the pipe and, and then it would get kind of lost, but then I could see that probably that was it. And then there was a faucet, and I moved the faucet and the water shuts off. And then I said, oh great. And I went to bed and so on. But I remember so clearly that I didn't want to deal with it because I'm not a plumber. It's not my house, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And something said, Daniel, do something. But what am I going to do? I don't know. Just see what happens. See what happens. Maybe destiny, maybe the world, maybe something will show it to you. It was it was an important experience for me. I'm not sure how exactly, but it was that thing. If there's anything I can do, I'm willing to kind of do it if I can do it. So I'll go down there and see if there's anything I can do. Yeah. But I guess that is the trust that, although I did not have it, but something in me did have it because I did it. Yeah, anyway. Anybody else has Mike? How?
Hey, it's so good to see you, man. There's a Sherry Huber book that the title of it is "The Thing That You're Seeking Is Causing You to Seek." There's something I really like about that, and one of the instructions I did when I did a workshop, a meditation workshop with her at one point was to just sit and watch your mind and your body, and then she gave a lecture at some point about at some point you have to stop watching the dead fish and let go. There's something about that I just really love. She gave this image of just sitting alone in a room and getting really fascinated with a dead fish and all the changes and the smells and the differences, and that eventually you step out past that and just let the dead fish go and become alive. There's something about that was very beautiful. And then there's something in jazz music that I really love, and one of the things I love about jazz is no one knows where the hell it's going, You've practiced enough, you've played enough that you trust yourself, There's a story about Herbie Hancock, who was a young man when he was told this, and Miles Davis, who's kind of a master of his craft, looks and says to him, "Don't play the butter notes." And he doesn't know what the hell butter notes are, but he thinks butter sounds like basic and they're simple and anybody would play them. So play something more rich and alive. That's not at all what Miles said. Miles said, don't play the bass notes or the bottom notes, but he heard it as butter. And just that mistake changed how Herbie Hancock played for the rest of his life. And there's sometimes, like in these kind of places, it just feels like it pushes us into discovery. And in my own insights, when I could try to control myself sometimes in practice, rather than letting myself open into the wildness of this experience, to try to be the perfect responder rather than responding from the truth. And the truth is always much more alive than Mike is, or my opinions or my ideas. So just sitting with those edges, the jazz music and getting into some weird angular corners of tunes and tones and trying to figure out what the hell to play next.
Yeah. What you said, Danielle, about not being into prayer in the form, I think he said supplication or something like that.
Petitionary, right.
Petitionary, yeah. And then had the experience of just saying, well, show me the way.
Right.
Show me the way, show me what to do. And so very reluctantly went ahead with this calling to take an appropriate response. And against your, it seems like your story is that it was against your own resistance. Just show me the way. And I think of that, something similar to that often nowadays. Often going back to what Phil said at the beginning of our meeting, where the human project here on Earth seems doomed, appears like it's going down. And like nothing you say or do or communicate or whatever can save it. And I frequently become very despondent about that, frequently. And have to have recurring moments of kind of a surrender of show me the way. What is my immediate appropriate response to this now? And that's a very hard discipline. That is not easy at all. I think it's a bone crusher myself. And I have so much in my mind that fights against it and says, that's not good enough. And don't be trite. That strawberry on the branch isn't really going to save the world. So what's that koan about anyway? Screw it, you know? And yet, how can there be anything different we can do? There isn't anything different we can do. So I don't know. As trust sometimes seems like it's the last resort when there's nothing else that you can hold on to. Yeah. It's almost like the last option. And meanwhile, on another level, you just keep going on with doing, I keep going on with doing what I do, like making dinner or sewing clothes or whatever. And life, that's my life.
Yeah. You know, there's the in the Tibetan tradition, they're the Dharma protectors. And I remember once talking with Ken, and I asked him if this particular entity was a traditional Dharma protector, and he told me, no, it's not. But I think I've told you guys it's Hayagriva, you know, that it's a important emanation of or whatever you call it, of Avalokiteshvara. It's a little bit wrathful. And so he said, so what, I said, what is it for you? What is it, since he's trying to to write this book about Vajrayana in the 21st century and in modern times, not just like a strange practices from 15th century Tibet, you know, necessarily, but how could that same thing be translated into practice nowadays? And he says, well, the protectors, you know, and I could relate to that, you know, that it's the prayer, which is not really a prayer, but maybe it is a prayer. It's like, may I have the strength to do what needs to be done. Not, oh, get me out of this, but if shit hits the fan, give me the strength to really take care of things. And emphasis of just give me the strength and some clarity if it's needed. And that's, you know, that's how I kind of see this invocation or whatever we want to call it, a prayer, you know, to the universe, you know, to whatever, you know, it's just a metaphor, but it works. I mean, for me, I'm not turned off by sometimes even using the word God, you know, I know it's just a handy term to use sometimes, although I seldom use it. But the universe, you know, show me the way, and I'm willing, but, you know, I need some help. Yeah. So, you know, probably that's what you're talking about, Carol. And I think that's all that we can do, you know, and that I think it's enough. It's enough. You know, it's like that. Until we are committed, there's hesitancy, always the possibility of turning back. But once we're committed, committed, and as if the universe will put things in front of you that maybe you had never seen them before. Nothing weird, I'm not talking about magical stuff, but it's like there's a change in the attitude that you open up, and then, you know, you start seeing things that you wouldn't have seen. Yeah, that I've seen over, I wouldn't say over and over and over in my life, but I've seen it in a few instances in my life that without me even knowing, but just taking a step and kind of taking a step to do something that was scary and they didn't know where it was going to take me, that I did just by opening my mouth. Just that, opening my mouth and telling this guy, hey, are you going tomorrow? Yeah, I'll go with you. And then everything changed. My life changed completely in that phrase, in that sentence. But I didn't know. I was scared. I went to bed and I was scared. I says, whoa, but then I woke up next day and I was kind of a little free, you know, and kind of happy and wondering, whoa, I wonder what's going to happen. That was the time that I decided to go to my first AA meeting. You know, it was just completely like that, you know. So I think that then we trust those things, you know. You know, it says that free will doesn't exist, that already the brain is you know, I'm not interested in that, but it made me think that the brain already has decided what you're going to do before you even think that you're going to do that, you know, so press a button or whatever. And, you know, if that's the case, I mean, it's like, you know, there's also this other kind of mysterious impulse that sometimes we're led to, or we just say, oh, just jump, see what happens. And without ever expecting, you know, yeah, when our life changes to the point that you would have never even imagined that for yourself. You know, a lot of what my life has become, I mean, you know, there's no way 30 years ago I would have imagined that I would be doing this. And forget about 50 years ago when I arrived in San Francisco. The way there's a woman who's an artist that is one of the testimonies in the Pillars story. She was I think she and her husband, I think they were somewhat well-to-do, and but she was a wreck and a mess and an alcoholic, she says. And something also happened to her in the midst of deciding to do something about Zen, and ended up going to. I'd never read that. If I read it, I you know, I didn't have that experience. So, yeah, and she went to her first meeting, and you know, her life started changing, and Zen became the path, and so on and so forth. All right. Well, thanks for listening and sharing.
Just a little translation issue on the koan, case 14 from the Blue Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
That first line is translated in lots of different ways. It's kind of interesting. What's his name? Cleary's have, what are the teachings of a whole lifetime?
Right, right.
Yeah. I translated as, instead of lifetime, epoch. What's the teaching of a whole epoch?
Mm.
Or a whole era? And they have an appropriate statement, and I have a proper single statement, or a proper single utterance. Not much different there, but it just has, they translate "and," the character for one, they translate it as "and," instead of saying one or single. That's fascinating. What are the teachings of a whole lifetime, or what are the teachings of a whole age or era?
Yeah, and Stephen didn't say response. He used another term, but very similar. An appropriate statement or an appropriate saying. Or an appropriate
Right. Utterance, saying, statement.
What I love is the cleanness of Yunmin's words there. They're just so simple, and yet they contain so much, you know? You know, it's you know, it is in and of itself an appropriate response. You know, points past trying to put things in a box, like Danielle was saying earlier. It kind of opens things up and includes a little bit of some of the paramitas too. This kind of polishing that happens from just practicing day in and day out, where the gleam gets a little brighter, even though the truth was there all along. You know, it's so grateful for Zen Men and how he does that.
Okay, dear ones, shall we call it?
The great Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra.
Hello.
Bodhisattva practicing the Prajna Paramita clearly saw that all five skandhas are empty, transforming all suffering and distress. Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness, no other than form. Form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness, exactly form. Sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all things are essentially empty, not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. Therefore in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, object of thought, no seeing, and so on, to no thinking, no ignorance, and also no ending of ignorance, and so on, to no old age and death, and also no ending of old age and death, no suffering, cause of suffering, cessation path, no wisdom, and no attainment, since there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva lives by Prajna Paramita, with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, and therefore no fear, far beyond elusive thinking. Right here is nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future live by Prajna Paramita, attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore know that Prajna Paramita is the great sacred mantra, the great vivid mantra, the unsurpassed mantra, the supreme mantra, which completely removes all suffering. This is truth, not mere formality. Therefore set forth the Prajna Paramita mantra. Set forth this mantra and proclaim Gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. The four great vows. The many beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. The Buddha way is unsurpassed. I vow to embody it fully. The many beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. The Buddha way is unsurpassed. I vow to embody it fully. The many beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. The Buddha way is unsurpassed. I vow to embody it fully.